Admiral Nimitz's buildup of Midway's defenses had paid off. The high state of preparedness prevented Midway's destruction and kept its aircraft from being caught on the ground. The timely launching of a counterstrike from Midway was also unexpected by the Japanese. In addition to being caught off guard by the Marine fighter planes, there was the heavy loss to anti-aircraft fire. The Japanese inability to neutralize the atoll in one strike was not surprising, but the heavy toll that would be extracted on their attack force was. Until this point, the Japanese had a low opinion of American defenses. This was exemplified when a Japanese fighter pilot did a low inverted pass over a sand island runway. The American preparations were exemplified by Marine Corps gunners promptly shooting him down. According to Japanese records, this was one of only 2 Zeros lost in the Midway strike mission. In fact, all but 11 aircraft returned to Pt.3. However, of those that did return, at least 14 were damaged beyond repair. This is in addition to wounded and, in one case, dead aircrew. This was an effective 20% loss rate. This could not be sustained, and Midway was still in American hands. This is where the battle begins to get complicated. These 4 men are about to set in motion events that will chart the course of the battle. The first American planes to attack Pt.3 are the 6 Avengers of Torpedo Squadron 8's Midway detachment. They were the first bombers to depart Midway and were led by Lieutenant Langdon Fieberling. Vice Admiral Nagumo Chuichi was prepared for an attack and had a full combat air patrol ready to intercept them. But just as the American planes begin their attack, Nagumo receives a message from Midway strike leader, Lieutenant Commander Tomonaga Choichi, that a second strike is needed at Midway. Meanwhile, Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance is launching the planes at Task Force 16 for an attack of his own on Pt.3. Aircraft from both the Enterprise and Hornet are getting airborne, but coordinated multi-air group attacks are not the forte of the American Navy in 1942. At 07:15 hours, Nagumo has his decks loaded with planes armed for an anti-ship action. He is unaware of the American aircraft carriers in the area, and he orders his planes struck below deck to rearm for a land action. While this is happening, his combat air patrol is engaging the first wave of American torpedo planes. The large Grummons press the attack without hesitation. They fought back as well as they could, but without fighter escort, their defenses were quickly overwhelmed. The attackers went after the second section first. All 3 planes were shot down before they could get close enough to release their torpedoes. Then they went after the first section. Ensign Albert Ernest's plane was badly hit. His turret gunner, Jay Manning, was dead, and his radioman gunner, Harry Ferrier, was wounded and unconscious in the airplane's lower compartment. The elevator controls were shot away, along with the electrical system. The hydraulics were also hit, which caused the tail wheel to drop in front of Ferrier's gun. Realizing that he would never make it to the enemy carriers, Ensign Ernest went for the nearest target of opportunity, the cruiser Nagara. He launched his torpedo and tried to make good an escape. Fieberling and Brannan were able to launch their torpedoes before being shot down. None of the torpedoes were able to score a hit.
down low, 50, 100 feet off the water, and suddenly popped over the horizon was a whole flock of Japanese ships.
Just off to our right of the carrier, there were 6 Zeros, wing to wing. The only problem was that somehow or another the fighters must have caught up with Mays and Watson in our formation, because they weren't flying a tight formation, and Murray and I were up forward, and we weren't bothered as much with the fighters as the other 2 planes were. So I never knew whether the fighters shot the other 2 down or whether an aircraft from the ship shot them down.
But immediately thereafter we were jumped by the Japanese Zero planes. And they were plentiful, and they were very brave when they had you outnumbered.
But nobody had prepared for some airplane flying the full length of their deck. And that's where we went, down the deck and back low enough that I think we could have touched the deck with our wheels if we'd have put them down. But we'd been shot up so bad that the airplane was flying a bit hazardously, try to make a turn and want to fall off on it.
One of the Marauders made what may have been an attempted suicide run on the Akagi, flying right past the ship's bridge before it crashed. This had to leave an impression on Admiral Nagumo, who was standing on the bridge at the time. These men were here to fight. These were not the lazy, pleasure-seeking Americans of Japanese propaganda.
And I pulled up in the clouds, and I thought the battle was over, when all of a sudden, a whole bunch of 20 millimeter came by right underneath my feet. A plane that slipped up on us and shot from low left, low right, and the waist gunner got him, but in the meantime, he shot out our hydraulic stuff. I dropped the gear, but then the nose didn't come down because we didn't have any hydraulics at all. So I came in and landed, and the nose dropped down, and the plane was going straight. But we stopped right on the very, very end of the runway.
The attack of the Marauders cost the Army Air Corps 14 of its best and brightest. Although Japanese rearming was again disrupted and 2 Zeros were shot down, it came at a brutal price. The Japanese B-5N2 torpedo plane was also used as a level bomber. But swapping the ordnance from torpedoes to bombs was no small task. The torpedoes and bombs used different mounting racks. This meant that after the weapon was removed, the rack also had to be changed. This added about 15 minutes to the rearming process. Also, the torpedoes required motorized dollies to move them around, and the Japanese only had 5 of these dollies per 15 aircraft. Nagumo's order to reverse the rearming process resulted in ordnance being left on the hangar deck floors instead of being sent back to the storage magazines. To further complicate matters, the Japanese hangar decks were 2-story affairs, yet each one of these bi-level hangar decks was isolated from the others. Both levels were served by a single elevator, and these elevators were aircraft-specific in size and had very tight tolerances. Japanese spotting, arming, and fueling operations were greatly slowed by the need for each double-deck hangar to share an elevator. Elevator cycle time was about 40 seconds per trip. Because the elevators were so tight, only one plane could use the elevator at a time. This would play a huge, and often overlooked, role in the outcome of the battle. The last point is that all of the operations required the ship to be on an even keel. If the ship was making defensive maneuvers, which it had to do every time American planes attacked, all of these operations had to be halted.